Hij vertrouwt de zaak niet aan.
Heel jou, dat wil zeggen.
Hij vertrouwt de zaak niet aan.
Ja, dat moet ik hebben.
Zou je wel een clean shirt aan?
Hij is al aan 10 hoor. Goed, nu serieus?
Ja, helemaal mij.
Ja, allebei. I think this. 1, 2, 3. This first, this second.
Ja.
You want? Je hebt veel mensen om alle vragen op de slot zien. Ik kan het ook.
Many of the steps towards the successful outcome of this project have already been taken. But, though we may have earned a moment's rest, we cannot afford to be too complacent. So, let us gather all our strength, for tomorrow is another day.
Jebel, 67 berths where none had been before, surrounded on all sides by a vast industrial complex of refineries, smelters and factories. How was it done? Who made the sea flow into the desert to make an instant harbor at the heart of a multi-million-dollar complex? It was the vision of one man, the ruler of Dubai and vice president of the United Arab Emirates, Sheikh Rashid bin Said Al Maktoum. Coupled with the expertise and energy of two joint venture companies, Gulf Cobbler and Mina Jebel Ali Construction, soon to become known and respected as MJAC. These are the companies who made the ruler's vision a reality and performed a construction feat that has echoed around the world. The vast project was set in motion when His Highness, with the Crown Prince and Finance Minister, in 1976, signed construction agreements with the Arabian, British and Dutch partners who together formed Gulf Cobbler and MJAC. In June the same year, the first dredgers ate their way through the beach from the open sea to begin their share of removing 120 million cubic meters of seabed and desert. At the inauguration ceremony, Sheikh Rashid was able to show the President of the United Arab Emirates, Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, the birth of a project that would add a new dimension to the future prosperity of their country. Within a few months of the signing, the sandhills were littered with millions of dollars worth of plant and equipment. The construction of one of the largest man-made ports in the world had started. From hastily built huts on the sand dunes, the consulting engineers began the preparation of the thousands of drawings that would create 2 great basins with 10 quays and extensive cargo facilities. They divided the work into 2 stages. Stage 1 was to dredge out the entrance channel and entrance basin to -8 meters, build 3 kilometers of seawall out into the Gulf, build another 3 kilometers of seawall to contain the reclamation area, complete 5 wharves in 18 months ready to receive ships, select an economic design for the remainder of the wharves, and have a second stage, the progressive release of all the berths within 4 years, well underway. The Wallingford Research Station in England built a model of the harbour to find the best alignment for the approach channel and sea walls to give maximum protection from waves to both ships and harbour. A total length of 5.5 kilometres of seawall was called for, made from 4 million tons of rock, armoured with 30,000 stay bits. As the nearest quarry was 35 kilometres away, a continuous stream of trucks were mobilised to deliver the 75,000 tons of rock a week necessary to keep Sheikh Rashid's schedule. The first wharves had to have a dredge depth of 5.5 metres. To make use of plant and materials readily available, they were designed with sheet pilings tied back to an anchor wall. Construction could thus start immediately, while more ideal designs were found for the key walls of the two great basins, whose dredge depths were 11.5 metres in one and 14.5 in the other. Unfortunately, early tests revealed a hard substratum that prevented conventional piles from being driven to more than 13 metres. This problem, and the worldwide shortage of construction materials, led to an unconventional engineering solution. A design that used available tubular steel piles joined together by slotted tubes welded along their sides to make an interlocking clutch. To give their ends a firm grip, the tubes were vibrated into slightly smaller holes for the last 5 metres. A capping beam was then cast over the top. This unique solution meant the first quays would be ready to receive ships in 18 months, on schedule. As the project got underway, a new village was built to house the army of workers and expatriate staff. 300 homes, with schools, clinic, sports facilities, and all the essentials of a modern community where none had been before. A major project by any standard. But within 6 months, families were moving in. In order to cope with the hard substratum and the client's schedule, 4 large suction dredgers had been specially ordered from Holland, each with the massive strength of 2,000 cutter horsepower. With the arrival of the heavy-duty dredgers at Jebel, dredging stepped up to a rate that made the schedule a certainty. As Jebel lay on a wide, shallow shore, an approach channel had to be dredged 20 kilometres out into the Gulf to provide a safe entrance. A laser beam location system was used to keep the dredgers in position 24 hours a day. By July 1977, the entrance wharf had been completed, and materials began to arrive by sea, just 12 months after Sheikh Rashid had signed the contract. With the first 5 berths well underway, there remained the construction of the quay walls surrounding the two great basins. 13 designs were considered with their many advantages and disadvantages. Experience finally pointed to a design dating back to Roman times. Mass blockwork. A design that had the great advantage of taking the concrete work out of the deep trenches onto a production line. This allowed seawater to be used for mixing concrete, a vital consideration in an area where fresh water is scarce. To make and lay the staggering total of 65,000 45-ton blocks, MJAC built the largest precasting plant in the world. A sophisticated 2-kilometer production line that applied the latest technology to an ancient design and reached the astonishing peak of 168 blocks a day. To maintain such a rate for 2 years, cement was needed at the rate of 1,000 tons a day. And 40 trucks had to work day and night, 7 days a week, hauling 6,000 tons of aggregate 130 kilometers from the quarries in the Hatter Mountains. With the decision to use block walls, the contractors faced their biggest problem, the groundwater. Could they lower its natural level of only a metre beneath the surface to 15 metres, so the walls could be built in dry ditches? Trials were carried out with extensive well pointing around the site to try pumping it out. It was a bold experiment that paid off. Within a few weeks, the groundwater had gone down to 15 metres, enabling the contractors to make a risk assessment that would decide the engineering of the entire project. If they built entirely in the wet, the client's schedule was impossible. Partly in the dry would make it possible, but could lead to financial disaster. If the groundwater got out of control, it would flood plants worth millions of dollars. They decided to build in the dry. The decision to build in the dry not only favoured block wall construction, it meant also that the expensive deployment of numerous dredgers to take out the entire 90 million cubic feet of sand and rock to form both basins could be avoided, and one of them could be formed by dry excavation instead. The main road through the Emirates was raised over a 4-lane culvert to give the dump trucks a quick, uninterrupted run to the surrounding reclamation areas. By the end of 1977, the completion of Stage 1 was in sight, 4 months ahead of schedule. The contractors had responded to a discerning client and were achieving staggering results. In February 1978, the Jebel Ali sand dunes of 18 months ago welcomed the first ship into Jebel Ali harbour. The second stage was to make further quays available to shipping while construction continued on the remainder of the harbour. An exercise in logistics to keep all aspects in phase: wet dredging, dry excavation and quay wall construction, so that all carried on simultaneously while the harbour became progressively more operational. The next quay sections that were to receive ships were isolated by building temporary dams across the completed walls and trenches. They could then be flooded up to sea level, their protective bunds removed, and the quays opened up for shipping. Isolating the completed quays with water stops meant that excavating and block laying could continue on the dry side without interruption. Wet dredging to form the remainder of the outer basin could continue nearby quite independently. The section of Quay 1 to be opened up for shipping early in the second stage has been especially built and equipped to handle bulk carriers bringing aluminium ore for the new smelter in the nearby industrial complex. The section of Quay 3 to be opened up was to be a major container terminal with sophisticated equipment for the rapid handling of containers from around the world. Early in 1979, Gulf Cobbler brought out to the Gulf the Al-Wasl, a new concept in the dredging world, especially built for this project. A self-elevating cutter suction dredger that actually walked on the seabed. A computerized monster that sat above the waves with a dynamic positioning system to lock barges beneath its discharge 24 hours a day without fear of tide or weather. Special dumping grounds for the spoil were located as a result of extensive surveys by biologists to minimize any adverse effects on marine life. With the Al-Wasl dredging out the entrance channel and all aspects working in phase, it was clear that Sheikh Rashid's 5-year schedule would not only be achieved, it would be better. Jebel Ali looked set to become a construction feat unparalleled in peacetime. Technical experts and heads of state came to look. 1979, the first container ship sailed into Jebel to bring another key into service and raise the number of ships now visiting the harbour from 20 to 70 a month, while half the harbour was still being built. As the completed section of the inner basin couldn't be filled by simply removing the protective dam, the resulting flood would have been disastrous. It had to be filled by siphon and pump. The dam, protecting it from the open sea, could then be removed. With the harbour moving rapidly to completion, so was the surrounding industrial complex. Each unit in the complex is integrated so that any waste material or energy from one is used by others. Waste chemicals from petroleum products are recycled to the aluminium smelter. Waste heat from the smelter drives the water desalination plant, and so on. And nearby, an international hotel rose on the foreshore. With the completion of the block wall quays around the outer basin, their construction trenches were also flooded up to sea level. The dredgers then removed the island left in the center of the outer basin to bring their share of spoil removed from the desert to 60 million cubic meters in less than 4 years. On the west side of the entrance channel, a 50-meter-high harbour control tower was built with a commanding view of the entrance and harbour. Before the end of 1979, only one major task remained: the completion of the 3.4-kilometre Quay 7. While the dewatering plant kept pumping out the continuously encroaching groundwater and discharging it into the channel, the completed quay walls saw the giant excavators scoop out the last of their 30 million cubic metre share of sand and rock. The building of Jebel Ali would soon be over. The financial risks and massive mobilization of men and materials only a memory. In April 1980, only 3.5 years since the first dredger ate her way through the beach, the last of the dry excavated basins was ready to be flooded. The filling of the inner basin was carried out quickly by the same pump and siphon method as before. There only remained the removal of the protective dam. MJack and Gulf Cobbler had excavated 120 million cubic meters of seabed and desert to let the sea flow in and make one of the great harbours of the world, surrounded by a vast industrial complex. The great project was completed. Spanish Sheikh Rashid's vision of a new harbour surrounded by new industries is now a reality. For 4 years, MJAC and Gulf Cobbler, using the most advanced techniques, kept all work in phase, so that weeks saved the first year became months the next, until the sand dunes of Jebel Ali saw one of the largest man-made ports ever built, completed in record time.